Working Group on Cooperative Development. We will start with a couple of housekeeping items to ensure you are familiar with the team's platform. This session is being recorded, and just checking to make sure it wasn't. If you're not comfortable with being recorded, you may end the session by clicking the red Leave button. This slide shows a screenshot of the control panel that we see. It may look different depending on the device you are utilizing. Number 1 is the mute button. At this time, everyone needs to ensure their microphone is muted. As a courtesy, please be sure to mute your microphone if you are not speaking. Number 2 is the chat button. Once it is clicked, the chat box on the right should appear. You can submit questions, attachments, messages to presenters, panelists, and attendees throughout the session. You may also communicate or request assistance with technical difficulties here. Number 3 is the raise hand button. If you would like to provide your questions or comments verbally during the Q&A session, raise your hand and the moderator will call on you to unmute. Number 4 is the leave button. If you need to leave the listening session for any reason, please click the leave button. Closed captioning. While not identified on the slide, if you would like to view live captions during today's session, please click the ellipses, the 3 dots going across, click on language and speech, and choose turn on live captions. Co-ops can work in any sector of the economy. The Interagency Working Group on Cooperative Development meetings that we've held since 2022 address how cooperatives work in food, housing, care, and in other industries, as well as cooperative statistics. This website maintains recordings of those meetings and has funding, partner organizations, tools, and resources for cooperatives. Please also review our Cooperative Services website that includes publications and other information to help with cooperative development. Also, look for the interagency publication, the Cooperative Quarterly. In the service of time, we will keep introductions short with our distinguished panel. Their full bios will be posted in the chat. Senior Advisor Benga Ajalore with the Office of the Undersecretary for Rural Development previously served as Senior Economist at the Center for American Progress, CAP, and former president of the National Economic Association. Before joining CAP, he worked as an associate professor of economics at the University of Toledo. He holds a PhD in economics from Claremont Graduate University and a bachelor's degree from the University of California, Berkeley. His portfolio covers equity, climate, and interagency initiatives. Senior Advisor Benga Ajalore, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Interagency Working Group on Cooperative Development. Today, we gather to discuss the use of the cooperative model as a strategy to integrate returning citizens back into the community after incarceration, especially to address employment and housing needs. We are honored that the 2014 Farm Bill authorized the Secretary of Agriculture to chair this interagency working group. The working group's task is to foster cooperative development and ensure coordination with federal agencies and cooperative organizations. We thank you, our governmental and private sector partners, for being here today to address this important topic. Cooperatives are a type of business model that is organized for the mutual benefit of the members who use its goods and services. Co-ops are controlled democratically by their member owners. Members own, use, finance, and govern their cooperative. Profits, called patronage refunds, are distributed to members based on how much they have used the cooperative. The amount of equity return provided to investors is strictly limited. And while most corporations must maximize profits for shareholders, cooperatives are a special subset of corporations that can have multiple goals, including helping their employees, suppliers, or community, in addition to helping their members. This flexibility allows cooperatives to use creative approaches which can save jobs and ultimately the business, particularly in times of crisis. Perhaps that is why our USDA co-op program statistics demonstrate that U.S. agriculture cooperatives are some of the most long-lived businesses in the world. Cooperatives are known for helping individuals build wealth and economic power, but they might be less well known for helping individuals build capacity, and members learn more than business skills. They learn to trust, make decisions, manage conflict, work as a team, and take on leadership roles. Studies show cooperative members are more involved in their communities and participate more actively as citizens. Today, we have a panel of community leaders who are organizing cooperatives to meet employment and housing needs of people leaving the prison system. And so for this population, one of our primary concerns is reducing the risk of recidivism. To do this, we cannot just focus on one solution, as there are multiple solutions to help individuals get on a sustainable path to success. Both employment and housing are vital to helping individuals get back on their feet. This discussion and this panel is vital, as it isn't just an either or proposition about housing and employment. Both are needed to get this population on a sustainable path. This conversation is also vital, as it will showcase the strength and flexibility of the co-op model to address issues on multiple dimensions. I'll turn it over to Margaret Bao to moderate our panel of co-op practitioners and federal partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Banga. Thank you for those words, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We are honored to have Dr. Jessica Gordon-Nemhart to provide background on the use of the cooperative model among those whose lives have been touched by incarceration. Many of you already know Jessica from her groundbreaking research on the often hidden history of cooperatives in the African American communities. In recent years, Jessica has examined the emergency use of the co-op model, both inside prison and among returning citizens. After Jessica speaks, we will showcase 2 returning citizen co-ops, one in Greenfield, Massachusetts, and the other in Los Angeles, California. So Jessica, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me, and I'm excited for this program. I'm ready to learn a whole lot. I'll tell you all a little bit about what I know. So of course, first the context, right? The United States incarcerates the largest number of people in the world. Often more than half are people of color. We know that incarceration creates additional burdens and debts on inmates and their families. It saps savings. It often causes even more additional debt. It severely limits economic options and opportunities, of course, while incarcerated, but also for previously incarcerated people. It doesn't adequately prepare them for reentry. I have a little bit of data from 2 different reports that are of interest. One is Eric Larson et al. From University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth in 2022. They actually looked at addressing previously incarcerated employment with cooperatives. And of course, they remind us that previously incarcerated people are still the last hired, first fired. We have studies that show that Black men with records are called back 40% less than white men with records who have the same qualifications. We have data about Black men with no criminal records having less callbacks than white applicants with similar qualifications, even when they have recently been released from prison. We know that women, who are the fastest growing prison population, and particularly Black women, face compounding barriers, often primarily and secondarily caregivers. So they're worried and have to worry about helping and taking care of others, not just themselves. They're often entrenched in sexism in the labor market. We have a study that shows that the criminal record for women is even more harmful than that for men when it comes to getting a job. Black women and Latinas with records are called back only a fraction of the rate of white women with records. And even when employers don't check criminal records, there's this perceived criminality amongst Black job seekers. And so they're hired less or channeled into very low-rung, low-wealth jobs. Another colleague of mine, Robin Cox at USC in 2020, did an interesting study I'm going to summarize in a minute about the way that ESOPs hire previously incarcerated people and what are the better outcomes there. But she also gives us some background again about why we should care about this, right? And talks about how incarceration marks individuals as untrustworthy, making it hard for them to find jobs. Formerly incarcerated with felony records often are temporarily prohibited from licensed or professional positions. So that's an additional barrier. Some states ban them from public sector employment. And then in that, right, we also know that we're in a climate of continued rising income and wealth inequality that has coincided with these last 30 years of mass incarceration. There's been erosion of the middle class and huge economic inequality, such that we have polarized jobs, right? High skilled workers get the best quality, highest paying jobs. Low skilled or perceived as low skilled workers get the low quality, lower jobs. And these have long-term costs, particularly on people who are returning from imprisonment because of the stigmatization, the debt that they have. And so therefore they have poor job prospects that also disrupt family bonds and increase their economic instability. So what's the answer? The answer is, as you heard, co-ops, right? There's ways that we can look at co-ops as, right, we can create jobs with co-ops. We can create the kinds of jobs that we need for people with experience in the criminal legal system. In the Larson report, they have a great quote about whether we were able to help them find a solution to their problems, meaning previously incarcerated people, they would always come back. We were sending them back to the same company or industry because people needed a job and the employers knew they could abuse them, but we weren't fixing anything. And that's really what we want to talk about today, right? How can we actually fix things, change those relationships, create owners, right? And cooperative, collective owners out of job seekers, especially who have been probably the most marginalized in our society. And so we want to look at a structure, right? Economic democracy, cooperative ownership, that addresses not just the labor issue, but also the psychological issues. So what have we found that works? So for Robin Cox's study, she looked at the ways that ESOPs hired, sorry, I lost my place. I wanted to give you the exact data that she had. ESOPs are employee stock ownership companies. And she was able to study the experiences of formerly incarcerated individuals who are employed at firms that are ESOPs, that have employee stock ownership companies. So essentially they're called employee-owned companies. She found that the formerly incarcerated individuals who worked in these ESOPs have higher annual earnings. They work reporting more hours per week than other formerly incarcerated individuals who do have a job, but not in an ESOP. The ESOP employment is significantly associated with several benefits: 25.4% increased earnings over people who weren't working for an ESOP, 8.8% increase in weekly hours worked, 9.5% decrease in the likelihood of arrest, 11.2% decrease in likelihood of being convicted of a crime, 3.3% point decrease in the likelihood of being convicted of a felony, and 12.3% decrease in the likelihood of being incarcerated. So we can see how just employee stock ownership can make a huge difference. So then worker co-ops, right, which provide even more better outcomes for workers, can do even better than that. What do we know about co-ops, especially worker co-ops? You heard some of it already, but from the research I've done, right, we find that co-ops can help address both unemployment and underemployment and employment discrimination. Again, especially worker co-ops, creating and owning co-ops yourself so you're not beholden to other people to hire you. Also, the inability to support or contribute to your family, work co-op ownership, being in a worker co-op, right? worker co-ops aspire to provide not just dignified work, but decent wages, living wages, not just minimum wages. And what I heard recently from First Nations communities out in the West, they talk about thriving wages, right? And we know that worker co-ops really try to do living wages and in some ways thriving wages. So co-ops can help address that income issue. Co-ops also help the issue of outmoded skills, right? Often returning citizens come back. They've missed some of the newest technology and the newest upgrades that the workforces are looking for. But co-ops, remember, are about education and training, right? So that they can help to provide that education, training, and support to update those skills, to find ways to recognize the skills that do exist and then to help augment those. Co-ops can reduce isolation and marginalization, right? Again, co-ops create leadership, social capital, working together, making decisions together. And we know that often previously incarcerated people are coming back and feeling very marginalized and isolated. Parole actually sometimes has additional restrictions and demands, but if you're in a worker co-op, you can get around some of those isolations too. The increased social capital and leadership development, I already said, and you heard about that already, but that also helps to increase people's competence and confidence. And so again, where people are growing when they're a co-op member, when they're in a worker co-op, they're increasing their skills as a human being, as well as the specific skills for the co-op that they're in. And all this helps to reduce recidivism, right? Providing stability, income, competencies, and opportunities. So I just want to end before you actually hear about the great examples of how this is working and what's going on. I want to end with some things that you should look for in the examples you're about to hear about, things that I've been learning and finding as I've been studying, talking to people and learning about this. We want to figure out, when I study incarcerated worker co-ops, I've learned that having effective co-op ecosystems to support incarcerated people, both in getting the kind of education they need to own and run a cooperative, and the support they need to own and run a cooperative, and to have clientele and people to sell to, because often the strongest incarcerated worker co-ops are selling to people in other co-ops and doing that intercooperation. So first, we want to think about how to create that a co-op ecosystem, a strong co-op ecosystem for previously incarcerated people, since we've learned that that works well for incarcerated worker co-ops. And then how do we do that? There's a bunch of things we should look for. What are these co-op education and co-op development projects including in their components, right? Obviously, workforce development, industry training, some business development, marketing, and entrepreneurship, but also the co-op economics training, the economic democracy training. So we need to make sure there's that whole set of components, not just one, right? A lot of times we just focus on the workforce development and not the other pieces. A lot of times marketing is left out, or consensus building, that kind of thing. So make sure we have all those components in place. Also, it should be an integrated approach, meaning we're attending to the whole person, again, not just in terms of the components of training, but how are we providing wraparound services and comprehensive services. We know that there are multiple challenges and traumas that people who have experienced with the criminal legal system experience. There's intersecting oppressions, intersecting identities, and so we need to pay attention to all those things, even language access, literacy levels, digital literacy, mental health issues, housing needs, and experiences with oppressions. So we need to tend to the whole person. And again, the co-ops that seem the most successful are doing that. You'll look and listen when you hear from our experts who are doing this. A third thing, or maybe I'm up to four, respect the special gifts, perspectives, and experiences and talents of previously incarcerated people. We often look at them with the deficit, right? What they don't have, what they didn't do, what they're missing, what 10 years or 20 years they lost, right? But let's also look at who they are, what gifts they have, what talents, and look from the asset perspective of what they've got. Fourth, connect to worker rights activities, policies that support labor rights, address labor market imbalances, right? It's similar to immigrant labor market, right? We need to look at the specifics of what's happening in that labor market and what are the workers' rights issues that we need to address there. Fifth, and I'm almost done, address the conflicting relationships to and feelings about paid work that previously incarcerated people are going to bring with them, right? They've had various relationships to work while they were in prison. They probably suffered under slave labor and things like that. They may not have had a good experience with formal work before they went to prison. So we need to try to understand and figure out ways to connect with helping them to address those traumas, right? Capitalism and economic exploitation is very traumatic by itself. And if you put, other experiences with the criminal legal system, we've got problems. And what they're coming out to, right, they were in a punishment system, not a rehabilitative system. And when they come out, they're still being punished economically. So we've got to stop that, and figure out how to help understand how and why they can now contribute as an owner and feel a part of something in the society that kind of threw them away. And the last thing is to emphasize that they have rights and responsibilities, right? That means we're accountable in democratic organizations. We need to be clear about what the challenges are for co-op ownership as well as the benefits.
Thank you. A sincere thank you, Jessica. That is a wonderful overview of background on what we need to consider. And we are so fortunate today to have Reverend Schendler. She is the founder of the Compost Cooperative, or one of the founders of the Compost Cooperative in Greenfield, Massachusetts. The Compost Cooperative was driven by racial and environmental justice, and the Compost Cooperative builds ownership opportunities among people who face barriers to employment while joining local efforts to address changes in the climate. The Compost Cooperative works to increase economic democracy, reduce food waste and methane emissions, enrich local soil, and implement transformative justice solutions to inequality and the prison system. So, Revan, we turn it over to you.
Thank you, Margaret, Robbie, Megan, and Deborah for organizing the webinar, USDA Rural Development for hosting it, the speakers for all your efforts to develop and document cooperative efforts, and to everyone here for imagining and supporting better futures for all of us and the planet. My name is Revan Schendler, and I'm one of the founding members and the worker owner of the Compost Cooperative in Greenfield, Massachusetts. I really welcome your questions at any time. In the last 10 years, a diverse group of individuals with different ideas and life experiences have come together across gender, race, incarceration status, educational level, and class barriers to build this business, including more than 25 incarcerated and previously incarcerated people. I want to acknowledge the presence of all those individuals in the co-op's history, even if I don't name them. The business opened in 2018 as a for-profit worker-owned food scraps hauler. 6 years later, we serve more than 300 residential, commercial, and municipal customers and are diverting approximately 180 tons of food scraps per year from landfills and incinerators, where, of course, they contribute to childhood asthma and further toxification of our environment, into local composting operations. Last year, we received a Co-op Innovation Award to launch a vermicast operation, and just this month, we're testing our first harvest of vermicast.
Oops, Revan, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I don't know how that happened. The compost co-op was developed inside a rural county jail by incarcerated people who identified the lack of meaningful living wage work. And I appreciated, Jessica, you talking about thriving wages. That's a beautiful concept I will look into. Anyway, they identified the lack of meaningful living wage work as contributing to reincarceration. That was their analysis. In other words, once you've been in the system, working at a minimum wage job or even at the plastics factory 12 hours a day will not help you stay out of jail. The goals of the incarcerated developers included having control over your labor and not being a cog in a wheel, was one. 2, flexible and non-punitive work schedules. 3, giving back to the community by protecting the environment. And 4, helping the next person out. How did the business begin operation, since most people coming out of jail don't have any money, credit, or access to capital? Well, the first worker owners set the share price at 0 and crowdfunded a rusty truck and liftgate to get started. We scrubbed out and reused 5-gallon buckets of flavor syrup from the local ice cream factory when we started residential curbside pickups in 2019. And believe me, I can't look at strawberry ice cream in the same way since then. As Dr. Gordon Nembhard has explained is often the way, we began with a kind of study group, weekly think tank gatherings inside the jail with community members joining from the outside. The inspiration of those groups was the Graterford Prison think tank in Pennsylvania, the educational and spiritual center of a project at Temple University called the Inside Out Prison Exchange Program. I'm just putting a link in the chat to that. Graterford Prison, by the way, was closed in 2018, and its 2,600 residents were relocated to a new $400 million maximum security prison next door. Many of the educators at the Graterford think tank were juvenile lifers. So they were sentenced to life in prison when they were children. Their work for collective liberation inspired a number of instructors who later taught at the Greenfield Jail and facilitated the think tanks. These groups worked on collective projects, read articles together, including parts of Collective Courage, had lively discussions, and even convinced the jail administration to fund a co-op academy inside the jail, which produced the first business plan for the compost co-op. The co-op model, as Dr. Adjulori mentioned, is inherently flexible, since its primary purpose is to attend to the needs of its members, and those needs change. After 7 members with experience of incarceration had to leave the compost co-op because of a lack of housing, the worker owners decided the business had to find a way to address that need, or it wouldn't survive and fulfill its mission. And we didn't want to separate those. We didn't want to survive and not fulfill the mission. We wanted those to remain intact. So all co-ops adhere to 7 basic principles. Number 6 is cooperation among cooperatives. So the compost co-op combined forces with another local co-op, Oxbow Design Build, to redevelop a dilapidated building into 3 units of affordable, energy efficient housing for co-op workers and people with experience of incarceration. It was during the COVID lockdown. There were many delays and supply chain issues. We made a lot of mistakes, and there's still a huge need for support to make the project financially viable. More than 60,000 people in Massachusetts are unhoused. Here, 3 households who collectively faced decades of being unhoused or housing insecure moved in a year ago, August. That only happened because of cooperation and the leadership of systems impacted people. So of course, it's nowhere near enough, but it's something. The business has been lucky. In this country, half of businesses fail within 5 years, 65% within 10 years. The co-op has made it 6 years for a number of structural reasons. We live in a state that provides health care to almost everyone who qualifies by income. I can't stress that enough. All of the worker owners and all of the staff are low income. All of our workers are now housed. Assistant Superintendent Ed Hayes and Sheriff Chris Donnellan of the Franklin County Sheriff's Office were very supportive of the efforts inside the jail that culminated in the co-op on the outside. The developers did their homework and created a business.
Oh dear, there we go.
Everything
Wait,
okay?
yes, you temporarily froze, so we
Are
missed
we still
about,
good to go?
yeah, we missed a few of the last words you said.
Can people hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Yes? Okay,
Yes.
good. Sorry about that. So we've had excellent technical assistance from co-op developers Tessa Collective and the ICA group. With no access to capital, the compost co-op has relied on grants, mostly for equipment and labor, to support activities from workforce training to food scraps diversion to composting with worms. We aim to reduce our engagement with the unpredictable grants process when the business infrastructure is complete. As John Bay will be discussing, for people coming out of jail and prison, an employer, in this case a cooperative, has to be.
Oh dear, I think something happened with our live feed. Oh, I think Revan is trying to come back in.
Am I back?
Yes, you are. Go ahead, Revan.
I'm so sorry about that.
No worries.
So I just was talking about John Bay's work, so interesting, and the importance of the reentry ecosystem, which has already been mentioned. So that the burden of connecting people to supports is not all on the employer. We need these supports so that people can show up fully for work, and the supports include getting an ID, a bank account, a phone, a computer, footwear, transportation, a place to stay, legal advice, a breathalyzer for a company vehicle. The co-op has struggled to provide all of those things, and not well, but we have, we recognized there was a need and we did our best to meet the need. Building a business is inherently challenging and unstable. Add to the mix the ways in which incarceration destabilizes human beings, and it's even harder to reach sustainability in a business. Most important, I think it's a lot to ask people coming out of institutions who face many challenges as they struggle to adjust to the outside world to work in the unstable startup phase of a business. So I'm really not, I'm a skeptic, but I'm also a believer. As we know, trust is essential in cooperative decision-making. When I hear the phrase returning citizens, I think of all that is required for anyone to deinstitutionalize themselves, including myself. In the case of someone coming out of jail or prison, where trust is something that could get you injured or killed, what does it mean to rebuild trust? What are the ideal conditions and how long does it take? After working for many years at a worker-owned co-op, I'm still interested in how the co-op model can be more inclusive of people whose mistrust once enabled them to survive. For workplaces to be inclusive of veterans and other people living with PTSD, healing practices and trauma-informed policies may contribute to business stability. It certainly has in the case of the compost co-op. So to conclude, compost co-op is an underfunded model that has taken a toll on its workers. And we've learned a lot about what is actually needed to realize the dreams of the original developers. Here are 5 investments that would make a real impact. Reduce the prison population and reinvest in the communities most impacted by mass incarceration. I'm not often shocked by prison statistics, but last week I read that in 2022, the cost of incarcerating one person in Massachusetts for a year, in some cases, exceeded $500,000, and more often was in the $100,000 to $200,000 range. So with those figures in mind, invest in job developers with lived experience. Low-income workers have shouldered the burden of development of the compost co-op and its benefit to the public good, with more than 25 formerly incarcerated people contributing to its growth, but only 15 being compensated. And the first 7 worker owners of the co-op had to have other jobs to support themselves. What that means is we have to invest in full-time living wage job creation, especially in a climate resilient green economy for people coming out of jail. If you aren't in a residential program with lots of restrictions, you may need to earn as much as possible to provide for yourself and your family, keep busy, stay active in your recovery. So I would say these full-time positions should include competitive benefits. 3, invest in community support infrastructure where workers receive assistance with reentry. It takes a lot of time, labor, and community building to establish the support systems necessary for previously incarcerated workers to function at their full potential. Again, as Dr. Gordon Nemhard mentioned, ongoing cooperative education, technical assistance, and anti-oppression training to build trust and a cooperative culture, bridge educational and cultural differences, and established all of the systems required in a business, from bylaws and trauma-informed policies to employee handbooks and insurance, with the awareness that a business run by systems impacted people will attract scrutiny. We have to have all of our insurance. We have to pay everybody by check, even if they don't have an ID. We have to be completely above board. And I think a lot of people coming out of jail are accustomed to people, wanting to pay them under the table and not observe their rights. Then finally, investment in housing, specifically small-scale, safe and affordable housing to revitalize downtowns and address the housing crisis. We learned from the housing initiative that the state housing grants were conceived for large developers. We need to change that and the laws and democratize the creation of affordable housing so it is within reach of everyone. So as Dr. Gordon Nemhard reveals in her book, Collective Courage, there's plenty of rich history of co-ops forming in the face of violence, exclusion, and extraction. We have the opportunity to work together to ensure that people who face barriers can not only participate in this model of economic inclusion, but can lead local responses to mass incarceration and the threats to our food systems from more frequent extreme weather events. Thank you so much.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Reverend. That was amazing.
If there's a couple of minutes, I can just show you some pictures of the developers and
Yes, please, go
right.
ahead.
Anyway, so we're a rural county. One of the things I wanted to point out here is that in a health survey in 2023, 27% of high school seniors reported at least one parent with experience of incarceration. You can change the slide, please. Franklin County is the most rural county in the state. So here are some of the incarcerated developers. We were able to get them out to the local composting facility, and yes, they also mentioned the need to heal. Next slide, please. This is a picture of the house we redeveloped. And there's another detail on this slide. We went from 0 for a share price to 100, and we still haven't made people pay that. So because we got too much flack for not having a share price. Next slide, please. That's a picture of the pile that we tip all of the food scraps by hand. I just wanted you to see what it looked like. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Reverend. Thank you for your great work, ongoing work. And now we are going to turn it over to the West Coast. We will hear from Mary Sutton and Richard Lopez of Collective Remake in Los Angeles, California. Collective Remake is a unique social enterprise designed to support the creation of worker-owned businesses and other kinds of cooperatives with people who have been incarcerated and other individuals who live in communities that have been marginalized socially and economically. So turning it over to you, Mary and Richard.
Okay, thank you. Hi, first I'll do just go over a quick introduction of myself again. I'm Mary Sutton in Los Angeles with Collective Remake. I'm in charge of design and management of the program. I created Collective Remake as a response to as an activist in the movement to stop prison and jail expansion in Los Angeles and California, and seeing the need for solutions and reinvestment in communities, as both Raven and Jessica have discussed. I did want to say one thing. I'm really glad to see the reoccurring theme throughout our speakers on sustainability and the need for all the aspects, tenets of sustainability to be applied in cooperative development, particular with folks coming home from prison and jail. So Richard, I'll give it to you to introduce yourself. Quick.
Okay. Hi, everybody. It's an honor to be here with all of you. I came to Collective Remake. I'm 62. I'm 63 years old. I came to when I was introduced to Collective Remake. I was in an ODR home. It's a re-entry home coming out of prison. And that's when I met Mary at the facility where I stayed. Since then, I started her trainee program, and I finished that, and then I went into the trainee program, all co-op, and then right now I'm a co-facilitator, and I'm learning how to run the meetings along with Mary. So it's a privilege to be around Collective Remake and all the guys that are participating. We just got a grant for our own business, the Green Halcones, that I'm a part of. And there we plant the seeds and grow the vegetables and fruits. And we have a lot of things to eat right now. So before long, we're going to be recycling around the community and raising the awareness of how desperately ex-convicts need a break, and we're getting it here at Collective Remake. Thank you.
Mary, you're on mute. Would you like the slides to be shown?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And that 10-minute delay, that will, okay, so that will.
There we go.
Okay, again, so we've heard Collective Remake, Los Angeles, doing cooperative education development with people impacted by incarceration and otherwise marginalized due to race, class, sex, disability, or age. Okay, you can move it forward. And my background as a longtime activist in the anti-apartheid movement and then the prison and jail movement in California has brought me to this place to find that cooperatives is a solution. You can move it forward, please. Okay. Okay, so all these slides in this PowerPoint are mostly what we use in our introduction workshop series. So I wanted to give the same context. We are working to embed critical theory through participatory education and using cooperative inquiry strategies, which provides an extended epistemology inside our workshops. And, you know, this allows us, we see transformation happening through this cyclical education strategies where people are given information and allowed to reflect on it and come back and share with the group what they learned. And in this context, as Raven states, we have as much to learn from the participants as we're sharing with them. So along the way, we're all developing as co-op educators and developers. So Jessica's gone over quite a bit of this, so we can move quickly through this. There's over 2 million people in the United States, the wealthiest country in the world, and supposedly the beacon of democracy. Between 1980 and 2007, the prison population across the country increased over 500%. That includes in California, went from 20,000 to almost 170,000 people. In California's 33 prisons at the time, all filled double their capacity. In the same time frame, it's really important to understand the political economy changes through neoliberal policies. Education costs in higher education went up on the same grid line in those years. And if you flip that grid line upside down, the disinvestment from education, K through 12 education and social programs all decreased and also in that same time period. This grid line is really important. You can go to the next slide because it represents so many things that explains the current economy that we're working in, where we understand that cooperatives is so important. In that same time period, we have to realize the prison population went up, but the crime rates did not go up. Crime rates have always fluctuated. What happened was that the powers that be, both Democrats and Republicans, changed sentencing laws. The 3 strikes laws in place in many states. The war on drugs is one of the biggest guilty parties, but excessive use of conspiracy and association charges. This has to do with gang injunction laws, and often a lot of times women are going to prison based on association charges because they're with somebody that committed a crime and they don't snitch. Mandatory minimums in 1977 and went from indeterminate sentencing to determinate sentencing. So this created a much broader net that was dropped on top of mostly poor communities of color. Okay, you can move that forward. And in that same time period, the hugest amount of money was extracted to the 1%. And that included the building of prisons in California and across the country. Okay, you can move forward. So it's in this context that we provide the cooperative education, and it's critical that we give the context as critical thinkers in this work. Beyond the folks that are actually incarcerated, another 4 to 5 million, maybe even 6 million people are on probation and parole, and another huge part of that population is more and more often on electronic monitoring, which is being incarcerated at home, basically. And then, of course, every person who's impacted, there's family members, loved ones, and whole communities that are impacted and disenfranchised by this extraction of people to carceral infrastructures. Okay, you can move that forward. So in this context, why cooperatives, right? So you can move through the next slides. Okay, here. So our introduction workshops cover, we do a really deep dive into the history of cooperatives using a lot of the information Jessica Gordon-Nemhart has introduced the country to, practicing democracy, just transitioning, envisioning a network of cooperatives in your community. And then we get into the business of starting cooperatives. You can move this forward. So like I said, we do a deep dive into practicing democracy and the cooperative principles and values. You can move forward these fairly quickly. So I won't repeat some of the, we know what the cooperative principles and values are. It's the values in the next slides that you can just keep scrolling through because of this 10-minute delay that we're not as familiar with as far as the principles, democracy, self-help, self-reliance, equality, equity, and solidarity. Of course, equity means that we have to do more work and provide those wraparound services for people coming home in order for them to have equal access to cooperative development. So you can keep moving forward. And then, the International Cooperative Alliance has a whole nother set of values that we don't look at very often, and maybe it should be self-explanatory, but we know in our work and in school and every place that we are that we need to look more seriously about the next set of cooperative values that will be, the personal and ethical values: honesty, respect, caring for others, openness, kindness, social responsibility, and I think trust should be on there, like Raven was talking about. Building trust and trusting yourself in these processes, very critical, working with people who have been incarcerated or impacted. We also take it further in as far as the principles and values, looking at cooperative values and mutual economies in other societies around the world. It's not a Western invention. And I think that's really important to know when we're working with people from different backgrounds and cultures, that it's human values of cooperation that have helped people survive for centuries around the world. You can go to the next. Indigenous communities in the United States are talking more about cooperatives and how their spiritual values align with the cooperative principles. You can keep moving through this. The Kwanzaa principles are coming out of the Swahili language. Even though Kwanzaa was developed in the 1970s, these principles go back for, centuries of a way of life in communities in certain parts of Africa. And in Papua New Guinea, they still hold principles and values around land ownership, keeping land in families. You can't walk away and sell your house and make a big profit. It stays in and goes to the next generations in the community. And then if we look at the Jackson Rising logo, they're using the images inside their logo are from the Asante people in Ghana in West Africa. The symbol in the center means help me and let me help you. The symbol on the left means in unity lies strength. And the symbol on the right means if your hands are in the dish, people do not eat everything and leave you nothing. So a lesson of staying involved in your community and being part of what's going on. So you can move this forward. And then, of course, we apply the, well, not of course, but the principles of sustainability on top of the cooperative principles. We need to consider the social, environmental, and economic aspects of any project we're working on for it to be truly sustainable. And we can go further even because there are scientific principles of sustainability, the sun, nutrient cycles, and biodiversity. If we see ourselves as part of that biodiversity, we need to look at those scientific aspects of sustainability to understand what incarceration is doing to people, and even the genocidal impacts of incarceration. Okay, you can move that forward. I want to let So our cooperative education strategies have been influenced by some of the earlier cooperative developers. It's interesting that, it's a group of priests from different parts of the country who were independently assigned to different parts of the world. Father Arizmendarati in Mondragon in the Basque area of Spain. Father A.J. McKnight was assigned down to Lafayette, Louisiana, and he has helped build the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. And Cody and Jimmy Tompkins in Nova Scotia built up the Antigonish movement. And what they all had in common was starting adult education programs in the community with the people that are impacted by the economic conditions of the day in their communities, and they were inspired by the social doctrine of the Catholic Church at the time, but they also all highly educated and critical thinkers that were applying the cyclical inquiry strategy inside their cooperative education for people to realize their own assets, understand the political context that they're working in, and to find what they have as individuals and as collective to look for solutions. Okay, so is my time up? So the extended epistemology, the cyclical learning strategies involves experiential, presentational, propositional, and practical ways of knowing. So everyone's participating in learning, reflecting, and presenting what they know. And I'm not sure of the time, but Richard, I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit more.
About 5 more minutes
Okay.
from Collective Remake.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to say that most of my life I was a drug addict, and 10 times I landed in prison, and I did this on the revolving door here in California. Today, they went to prison, but all the times I got caught in the revolving door, they lowered some whatever standard they were judging us by and sending us for prison. Just because they had a prior prison term, you automatically were given another sentence doubled up just because they were doing it. And so I've been out of trouble for actually since the time I met Collective Remake. I needed something to do, and I found out when I was 62 that I'm a senior citizen, and so it was an eye opener for me about myself and how much I lost through my addiction and through my imprisonment. I did work. I was pretty smart as a young man in school. I graduated, but I just was in a lot of trouble even then. So I just wanted to say that through cooperatives, it's given me something to do, spend my time. I go to our Alcoholics Anonymous here in West Hollywood, and they're a support system along with co-ops and Collective Remake. So I appreciate everybody's help. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Richard. And I see there's a picture of the green halcones out of Los Angeles.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, so the Green Halcones is an urban garden beautification and recycling project. Working with folks in ODR, all been through the Office of Diversion and Reentry, and in new housing infrastructures that are popping up all over LA, but not necessarily getting the program they needed. So this group has fluctuated in who's in it because of issues around rehab and chemical use and things, but we're still going strong and just got a great grant from the County of Los Angeles through their Care First initiative that also came out of the grassroots work to stop prison and jail expansion. And so in that way, we've been educating county leaders about the opportunity for cooperatives, and we have a chance to demonstrate what that can mean. So it's exciting and a little scary at the same time. We need all of your support.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Mary. Thank you for speaking on behalf of Collective Remake and the Green Halcones and all the good work that's going on in Los Angeles. So thank you. I want to share with you, this was a great overview of 2 cooperatives on opposite sides of the country doing some inspiring work. And now we want to talk about some representatives from the federal government to learn more about some of the resources that may be available through the federal government in support of cooperatives for people whose lives have been touched by the justice system. As I was preparing for this webinar and this topic, I came across a piece entitled Building Reentry Ecosystems, the Blueprint for Innovation. And the author is John Bay, who is a Second Chance Fellow with the Bureau of Justice Assistance at the U.S. Department of Justice. We in the co-op community speak quite a bit about building ecosystems to be supportive of cooperatives and cooperative development. So John's work really resonated with me, and I think his work will resonate with all of you as well. So without further ado, thank you, John, for joining us.
Thank you so much, Margaret, and the USDA and the Interagency working group on cooperative development for having me. Could I have the slides up, please? Or I can share it as well?
I think they're coming up. Thank you.
Great. Oh, so as Margaret mentioned, I am a visiting fellow or a second chance fellow with the Bureau of Justice Assistance at the U.S. Department of Justice. And one of the projects, or one of the things that I've worked on, was to really think through how resources can be redirected to build and transform communities or ecosystems that support people after incarceration, after they're coming home from prison or jail. So next slide, please. Before we get into that, I want to talk briefly about the BJA Visiting Fellows Program and the Second Chance Fellowship, and then I will talk about the project and lift up an example that I found through my research, and we'll definitely reserve some time for Q&A. So next slide, please. And next slide. Next, thank you. So the BJA Visiting Fellowship Program was launched in 2012 to really address emerging issues and build capacity to improve the criminal justice systems. And the purpose of it was to bring in people with different expertise into BJA so that they can inform policy and practice and really contribute to BJA's efforts. At the same time, it gives an opportunity for fellows to collaborate with different stakeholders in government and really work on a project of their own. The Second Chance Fellowship brings people with lived experience in the criminal justice system to BJA. So I am part of the 2021 cohort, and currently there are 3 Second Chance Fellows under this program. Next slide, please. So before getting into this project, I want to briefly share my background and how I got to where I am today. So I started my work providing direct service to formerly incarcerated college students who wanted to go back into college after prison or jail. And then I transitioned to a national technical assistance and policy role, helping to design college and prison programs across the country, and also help public housing authorities change their admissions policies. From there, I had a couple of roles in philanthropy, where I was designing and implementing grant-making strategies and providing resources to different criminal justice reform organizations across the country. And I currently am a visiting fellow, and I'm also working on housing issues, advocating for policy changes across the country. So I share all of this to say, you know, I bring a few different lenses into this work. But the one experience that really catalyzed or spurred my thinking around this project was my role and experience as a funder. And as a funder, I, saw that there were, different ways that we can tackle mass incarceration. Next slide, please. And we need all the approaches, because I think some of the other speakers spoke about kind of the scope and magnitude of mass incarceration, but it's also a very complex system and a landscape, right? So there's 50 states with prison systems, one federal prison system. There's local counties with thousands of correctional facilities all under their purview. And we have to recognize that 95% of people incarcerated in those facilities at some point will all return to their communities. And these communities are vastly different, right? They have their they may have their own unique challenges. One thing that I have come to learn is that there's differences in where people return to. So like if they return to an urban setting, they may have access to public transportation and different types of employment opportunities. Whereas if they were returning to a rural community, the challenges may be a little different. And then on top of that, there are tens of thousands of collateral consequences that people face. Societal barriers put into place by policy and law that exclude people who have some sort of conviction history from virtually every facet of life: housing, employment, social services. So in order to address all of this, we need all the approaches that we can get. And there is, what I've come to, I think that what I've seen is that, there's policy change efforts that need to be supported. There are direct service organizations that need to be supported. But we also need to be thinking about how to transform and develop the ecosystem or the communities in which in which people return to. Next slide, please. So in thinking through this project, I interviewed multiple criminal justice system stakeholders, people with lived experience, to see if there were emerging examples of kind of the concept that I was envisioning, right? And the concept that I was envisioning was these resources that are coming through, federal grants or state grants or even private dollars, to be redirected to local people, networks, and community organizations, so that the supports and the surrounding environment of the people that are returning from prison are actually flourishing, and then in turn that the person who is returning can flourish as well. And really, the other tenet of this concept that I was visioning is not that we're just supporting organizations to provide services and then really having the onus of success on the actual individual, but helping organizations invest in their own infrastructure so that they can actually build out kind of and develop neighborhoods around them. And really, and a final tenet of this concept is making targeted investments in local geographies, because people are returning to communities and neighborhoods, and we need to figure out how some of these communities, which are often the most marginalized, cut off from resources, how they could be invested in, reinvested in, right, so that the people, neighborhoods can flourish. Next slide, please. So in my interviews and the examples that I found, which highlight two organizations in Colorado, or two initiatives in Colorado and Michigan, I found that, in order for us to think about how to develop thriving ecosystems that support people returning home from prison and jail, we need to think about a few things. First, in redirecting resources, we need to help we need to support the capacity and operations of community organizations. Thinking about the infrastructure of an organization, we need to help them not just provide the good services that they do, but help them develop their accounting systems, right? Their back office procedures, grant making, actually grant reporting and grant writing and all of that. I mean, these are the operational capacities that can support the organization to provide those services, and resources and funding needs to account for that. The second kind of focus of building these thriving ecosystems is that, community entities operate within a larger ecosystem of, system stakeholders like the Department of Corrections, businesses, education institutions. And when we're talking about issues related to public safety and criminal justice, there needs to be dialogue between the community entities and the criminal justice system stakeholders, because I think that dialogue is so key and important to, make sure that folks that are coming home are, receiving the essential services and supports that they need, and that nobody actually falls through the cracks. So in order to maintain this dialogue, it's important to build bridges between these two stakeholders so that they can support the people that are coming home. Third, I mean, I think this is, critical in kind of all the work that we're doing, but we need to think about sustainable funding streams, right? Seed funding, piloting, thinking through these initiatives. It's important, but but these are long-term efforts, and in order for these long-term efforts to actually succeed, we need to think about how to sustain, funding sources. Fourth, it was critical in kind of my research that the pipeline or bench of system impacted people is developed, and folks that have involvement in the criminal justice system are placed in leadership roles, so because they are the experts, right, and they have the subject matter expertise and the lived experience to really support their communities. But it's not enough to thrust them into these roles. It's important to help them develop as leaders, so to provide training and the resources needed to take on these roles. And finally, it's important to engage the community. And when we say community, I mean everyone, right? So issues related to reentry housing, if you're working with a public housing authority, it's not just the public housing authority staff, it's, the resident board. It can be, law enforcement. It can be direct service organizations, homeless shelter homeless service providers. All of these stakeholders are part of the community, and it's important to make sure that those voices are included when trying to develop these ecosystems. Next slide, please. So an example that I want to lift up comes out of Colorado, and it's called the Colorado next slide, please. Work and Gain Education and Employment Skills program. So I think that this is such a great example of how public resources were redirected to the community, and how a set of organizations really grew out their budget, their services, their operations, and transformed the communities that they were operating in. So this program started with $500,000 in fiscal year 2014. And by 2021, this program grew to an $8 million program. And it's essentially a a government grant program administered by the Department of Corrections. But what's unique about this program is that they use an intermediary called the Latino Coalition for Community Leadership to bridge the relationship between the Colorado Department of Corrections and community leaders. They get the community ready to apply for these grants. And once a grantee is selected, they help the organization with kind of the operational support that they need so that they can, not just receive the grant and provide services, but build a robust operation so that they can actually attract more resources and grow their entity. And, several of the organizations were led by formerly incarcerated people and had people with lived experience on staff. And I think that was critical because they, this initiative and all the organizations and partners that were part of it understood the value of lived experience when working on these issues. Next slide, please. So this is just an example of how neighborhoods are transformed and changed. And so Second Chance Center is an organization that operates out of Aurora, Colorado, and the founder of the organization jokes, and he says that when he first started, it was a mobile unit because he didn't have an office and he operated out of the trunk of his car. But Second Chance Center was selected as one of the early grantees of the Wages program. From the trunk of this car, right, it became a multi-million-dollar organization, and one that operates what you see here on this slide, which is Providence at the Heights. So they developed and now operate a 50-unit supportive housing complex. They broke ground, I believe, in 2020 or 2021, and are now working on the next kind of project that provides supportive housing in Colorado. So I think this is like a clear example of how government funding redirected to a small community organization with the proper support from an intermediary, helping that organization grow out its operational capacity, grew to now provide housing and other supportive services, transforming not just the people and the community around them. So with that, do I turn it back over to you, Margaret?
Yes, please do. Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you for that great example. And thank you for your work with the ecosystem development that is needed for this type of work. I believe that a colleague of yours at the Department of Justice with the Bureau of Justice Assistance, Andre, is on. And I was wondering if he could unmute himself and maybe share a few words on behalf of the Bureau of Justice Assistance on this topic. I see that Andre has been busy in the chat adding some great resources. And if you're not able to unmute, that's fine. We've got some great resources from you, Andre. Thank you for that. Hillary, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Yes. Welcome. I'm going to introduce a friend, longtime friend of the co-op community, a longtime co-op developer doing some great work. And she is now the chief of the Division of Employee Ownership at the Department of Labor. So thought this would be an opportunity for you to speak on the behalf of the Department of Labor.
Thank you so so much, Margaret. It's great to be joining another one of these interagency task force meetings. I've been able to attend several in my previous role, but I am brand new now at the Department of Labor. I'm in my second week, so this is probably the first time I've had an opportunity to publicly introduce myself as such. So lovely to see old friends and to hear about the wonderful work that's happening with folks coming out of the prison system. So as Margaret mentioned, my new job is to head up the Employee Ownership Division at the Department of Labor, and this is a new division that was established under the Work Act, the Worker Ownership Readiness and Knowledge Act. It was passed in December 2020.
Can you pull your mic down?
Pending bill.
Hillary, we're having trouble hearing you. Your microphone might be up. Could you? There
You're
you
right.
go. Thank you. Thank you.
I am so sorry. I'll be brief, but should I start over? Sounds like you may not
Yes,
have
why
heard.
don't you go
Okay.
ahead? Yeah.
I'm so sorry. It's really nice to be here. I've enjoyed these interagency task force meetings, many of them in the past, in a previous role, and I'm actually in my second week as the chief of the Employee Ownership Division at the Department of Labor. So this is probably the first time I've publicly introduced myself as such. So I'm really happy to be here among friends from the co-op movement as part of this great conversation about how cooperatives are serving the community of returning citizens. Just very briefly, my job is to head up a small division within the Employee Benefits Services Administration, which is part of the Department of Labor, whose goal is to promote employee ownership, broad-based employee ownership in all of its forms. So that definitely includes worker cooperatives, as well as ESOPs and employee ownership trusts. And yeah, we're really just getting started. So the Department of Labor brought in a team internally to kind of start getting this initiative off the ground and having stakeholder kind of listening sessions, and then hiring someone to head up the work. So we're sort of relaunching now, and I'm looking forward to continuing to work closely with the cooperative community and colleagues at USDA and other federal agencies, and very excited to be in this new role. So nice to see everybody, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Hillary. I do believe we have Andre back on the, he got bumped off the webinar call. Andre, are you able to unmute?
Yes, I believe I am. My apologies.
We hear you.
Okay, great. In the interest of time, I'm just going to run through it. Hello, everyone. I'm so grateful to be a part of this rich discussion. I'm learning as I should be, and it will inform the work that we continue to do here at the Department of Justice Bureau of Justice Assistance. Just for situational awareness, we like to consider ourselves the philanthropic arm of the DOJ, and many of you may have heard of Second Chance Act funding in this space, right? That is my role. I, along with many others on my team, including John Bay, right? I heard earlier that we should look at individuals with lived experience, right, as an asset and to bring their perspectives in. So prior to me being pushed out of the call, please know that I put in all of the funding opportunities that are currently open here at the Bureau of Justice Assistance, including the visiting fellow that John is a part of, right? We have open opportunities. Hint, hint, I see a great deal of faces who I believe identify as female, and we want to hear from those voices as well. To date, we've had individuals who identified as men, and we definitely want to make a push to be to think about being gender responsive and what that means for individuals who are returning to their respective communities, but more importantly, to have that voice in a policy space at BJA. I've also taken the opportunity prior to me kicking off, being pushed off, I put in that we currently have open opportunities that align with the thinking of cooperatives, right? So we have what we call an incubator, right? Second Chance Act Community Incubator. Currently, we have, through our partners, right, at Impact Justice, they're leading the National Housing Incubator. And through our partners at Latino Coalition for Community Leadership, they're leading our community-based reentry incubator. So again, not the difficulty and challenging pieces that go into getting a DOJ grant with all of its audits and compliances, but this is an opportunity to reach out to smaller faith-based institutions, community-based organizations, and cooperatives, right, who are thinking richly, who are doing some great work, but don't want to go through the hassle of sometimes getting the larger grant. So this is just a small funding opportunity that I wanted to share. Again, separately, one is is National Housing Incubator. The other is the Community-Based Reentry Incubator. I also put in there the fellowship, BJA's actual web address, as well as our partners that we put all things about reentry on the website, the National Reentry Resource Center. So that's me speaking fast as the native New Yorker that I am, and really giving the opportunity if there are any questions.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that, Andre. And thank you for your persistence in getting back on the call. Sorry about that. Yes. Is there anyone else from the federal family that would like to speak up before we have more of a question and answer?
Yeah, hi, Margaret. This is Megan Meacham from HRSA, the Health Resources and Services Administration. I'll be brief because I put my little blurb in the chat. So there's a link with all of our Rural Communities Opioid Response Program grantees. And I just wanted to acknowledge that it's a program to address substance use disorder treatment and recovery in rural communities. So, if there are any grantees operating in your communities, it'd be a great opportunity to try to partner with them to help build, the community to help with the reentry space and ensuring that individuals can have access to all of the social supports they need in addition to continuing to get access to treatment.
Great. Thank you. Very important. Anyone?
This is Mallory Johnson from the Department of Labor, and I'm with the Reentry Employment Opportunities and Office of Workforce Investment. My colleague Kevin is on the line, so I see he's put in the chat a lot of our websites, our Reentry Opportunity link at Department of Labor, with the Career One Stop that we have geared just to the justice-involved ex-offenders, our Workforce GPS, where all of my units grant opportunities that awards are listed at also. One of my babies that I put in there was the federal bonding program, which a lot of people don't know about, even though we promote it a lot. This is for any individuals with a barrier to getting a job. But basically, I promote my people. They usually be fidelities or fidelity bonds from $5,000 that can be stacked up to $25,000. It's no cost to the employer or the job seeker. So this is like the best kept secret. Okay. So I want you to make sure you take those links down, look there. Each state has a bonding coordinator. I think Connecticut is a little bit out of the loop yet, but we're working with official to try to get that back in. And this is for anybody. The only person that couldn't get one of these is someone that's self-employed.
Great. Thank you for that. Very helpful. Anyone else from the federal family? Well, why don't we open it up to anyone from in general have some observations, comments, questions? If not, I'm Ron. Go ahead, Ron Guidos from the Keystone Development Corporation.
Yep. Thanks, Margaret. I have a question. We saw a good presentation on prison-based cooperatives that the Sustainable Economies Law Center had. This is very just wonderful about people who have returned. I'd like to know if you have resources or experience or examples of co-ops forming inside and then making the transition to outside after release and leaving the system or being in the system outside. I appreciate any insight into that. Thanks.
This is Mallory again. You can go to the Reentry Employment Opportunities website, and we have Pathway Home there. And those are individuals that start behind the walls and end. So you can start there.
All right, thanks.
I can also respond to that a little bit. The examples of cooperatives inside prisons is we are finding most of them in other countries, in Europe, Argentina, Brazil, Puerto Rico, even Ethiopia. the incarceration system in the United States is much more cruel and unusual, and the massive amount of people inside and the way things are operated makes it much more difficult to think that we could actually have authentic cooperatives inside. But there's plenty of people talking about bringing cooperative education inside of prison so that we can create the pathway. I think it's really important to prioritize building infrastructure on the outside, but that doesn't preclude us from beginning cooperation education on the inside. And yeah, if we can simulate cooperatives inside, you know, that will be in a new day and a new, like Gavin Newsom is looking to make San Quentin look like a Norway prison. Well, we won't have anything that looks like a Norway prison until we release over 2/3 of the people that are inside, because Norway doesn't incarcerate people for the same things that we incarcerate people for. So that's something that this movement needs to look at. There's a huge systematic problem with incarceration in this country that's based on race, class, money, and hiding away social problems and people. And so yeah, just going inside and doing it, we need to be conscious of the context of it all and be careful that we're not supporting the expansion of carceral infrastructure rather than working towards abolition. And I believe cooperative development can be an abolitionist project as well as a project of reparation.
Mary, I totally agree with you. I just would say, Ron, there are a couple of examples of what they're calling inside out, not just inside out education, but inside out co-ops. There was one that operated for about 6 years in Canada, I believe in Winnipeg. So you had inside artists were making the art and a member of the co-op, but the co-op was actually incorporated outside and had outside members who were supporting the artists inside and also doing all the marketing and development. If you got released, you were still a member of that same co-op and just started working as an outside member of the co-op. So that's a way to go. Some of the social co-ops in Italy operate a little bit like that too. You can, the co-op itself is incorporated outside, but it hires and has members who are inside. And when they come out, some of them are able to stay in their co-op. And then an exciting example in Ethiopia is the opposite. The co-ops are created inside, but if you're released, you can continue to work. You just go to prison during the day to work in your co-op and live outside once you're released. Wow. So they don't you don't lose your co-op ownership or business because you got released. So there's some interesting models that we can be looking at. Mm-hmm. But I totally agree with Mary about, how we need to be thinking about these things in terms of the ultimate purpose and goals.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Robbie, do you have an observation?
Well, Charlene had asked if, probably for Andre, if they could speak more on the philanthropic branch of OJP. I know, Andre, you put the link in there, but she had asked if you could speak more on it.
Yeah, I think it's just a description, just a little moniker that we use. Often folks who are not, if you haven't worked at, state or local government writing grants, or you haven't worked in a nonprofit actually being a part of grant writing, you may not know, the plethora of opportunities that are available through the federal government. Or sometimes we're often just leaning towards subject specific, right? Sometimes we're studied in certain disciplines and we just kind of lean in that direction. Well, believe it or not, DOJ covers a multitude of areas, whether it's research, statistical, but in the case of BJA, it's funding opportunities. And more specifically for this conversation, right, would be Second Chance Act. But we do have additional funding for restorative justice and some of the other pieces that sort of kind of come into the spectrum of working and assisting and learning from individuals with lived experience. So it's a huge piece. I mean, if I was to take a poll, how many individuals knew that we had visiting fellows for the last few years since the Obama administration, right? Where they're not just, creating a project. I mean, John's blueprint was heavily supported, real well researched, and one of the great opportunities for us to learn and think critically about funding, but also systems alignment, systems coordination, and the different pieces that goes into this work. So I think when I meant if it was really just a kind of signal that it's not the other side of DOJ, right, that brings enforcement, but to suggest that it's the philanthropic side, meaning we give out a great deal of funding, grant funding.
Okay. Thank you for that. I was speaking to, I guess, something of the mission and vision, and I wanted to understand what it looks like to participate within an organization that I was not familiar with, but what it looks like to do subversive or supplemental work to that. So I was honing in on use of the word philanthropic to understand. So thank you.
Yeah, please feel free, Roddy, thank you for putting the contact information. Send me an email. Happy to discuss the many vast opportunities that are available, and to think richly about some of the work that you're doing. So,
Mary?
Yes?
Yes, this is Kevin Thompson. I'm also with the Department of Labor. I wanted to mention to the group today, up the road from you in San Francisco, there's an organization in the Tenderloin, which I think everybody appreciates, is one of the areas in San Francisco where a lot of disenfranchised and down in their luck folks live. And a number of homeless veterans and people with drug issues visit the Healing Well, which is a non-judgmental center. And I know something about it because my sister volunteers there. Well, the interesting part of it, thinking about the Olympics coming up, there's a gentleman named Markel Taylor. He was known as Markel the Gazelle when he was in San Quentin. You mentioned San Quentin. He's been released, and there has been a documentary done by ESPN on Markel and a number of other runners who joined a running club in San Quentin before their release, although a lot of the incarcerated gentlemen are still in the prison. And the documentary is fascinating, not only about the coverage of the 26-mile run around the San Quentin dirt track, but also the life that the prisoners experienced. And they would interview family members who were outside, as well as Markel's contemporaries and colleagues between the prison walls. So I would urge people, if you haven't seen that documentary, I think if you Google ESPN, Markel Taylor, or 26.2 to life, 26.2 being the marathon distance, it's stored online. It's well worth a look at. Again, it's not necessarily related to the theme today in terms of cooperatives, but I think it suggests, getting back to some of the points John was making, in an ecosystem, you need all sorts of contributors and supportive service organizations. And I did want to mention the Healing Well in San Francisco. They have a web page. If anybody is inclined, you can put that in Google as well.
Great. Thank you for that, Kevin. I see Dr. Jessica Gordon-Nembhard has to jump off in just like 2 minutes. Jessica, would you like to say a few final words of wisdom?
You put the wisdom on there. Now I don't know if I have anything wise to say.
Always.
Thanks. I don't know. I feel like everybody already said it. I think we heard great examples and great perspectives. For me, the issues are, how can we humanize, not just humanize, but really transform our society, right? We need to worry about climate change, our planet, as well as human beings. And co-ops, with our flexibility, have a great opportunity to do that, but we can't do it without, right, developing these ecosystems, without looking at all the different pieces that go into what makes a co-op strong, but also how to even get us to the point of being able to educate, work together, and trust each other to do this. So I think we're on the right track. I'm very excited about the things that are already happening, and want to congratulate the people who presented here, because it's very exciting what's in the horizon, what we can do.
I think Jessica says it best. Thank you, everyone, for staying on a few extra minutes. Thank you to all our speakers, both in the co-op community and in the federal family. So thank you one and all for joining us, and we look forward to the next interagency working group on cooperative development. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Bye-bye.